She had always trusted trails more than people. Dirt paths never pretended to be something they weren't. They led forward or they didn't. Forests didn't lie, even when they frightened you. That belief had carried her through years of hiking alone, across ridges and valleys, through rain-soaked mornings and silent afternoons where the only sound was her own breath. The Appalachian Trail had been on her list for a long time, not because it was dangerous, but because it was honest. Long, relentless, unforgiving in a quiet way. On the morning she stepped onto it, the forest welcomed her with mist hanging low between the trees. The air was cool, sharp enough to wake every sense. Her boots pressed into damp earth as if the ground itself was testing her weight, deciding whether to accept her. She smiled to herself, adjusting the straps of her backpack, feeling the familiar comfort of being alone, but not lonely. Birds called somewhere deep in the woods, unseen but close, like watchful eyes. She had planned carefully. Maps marked, checkpoints noted, supplies measured. Friends had warned her, not harshly, but with that gentle concern people use when they don't want to sound controlling. She had laughed it off, promised to check in when she had service. She always did. Independence had become her identity, something she wore as naturally as her boots and jacket. On the trail, she felt more herself than anywhere else. The first days passed quietly. Miles unfolded beneath her feet, each one blending into the next. Sunlight filtered through leaves in broken patterns, painting her path in gold and shadow. Other hikers came and went, brief conversations shared like passing breaths. Names were exchanged and forgotten. Everyone was moving towards something, even if they couldn't quite name what it was. At night, she set up her tent with practiced ease. The forest changed after dark. Sounds grew heavier, closer. Branches snapped without warning. Wind whispered through the trees like a language she didn't speak. Still, she slept well, the kind of deep sleep that comes from exhaustion and clean air. Each morning she woke feeling strong, capable, certain she was exactly where she was meant to be. On the fifth day, the weather shifted. Clouds rolled in thick and low, swallowing the sky. The trail narrowed, roots twisting across the ground like traps. She slowed her pace, careful with each step. Rain began softly, then harder, soaking into her clothes despite the jacket. The forest darkened, colors dulling into deep greens and browns. She checked her map, reassuring herself she was still on course. By afternoon, the trail seemed less clear. Markers appeared farther apart. The path split in places, thin offshoots cutting into dense undergrowth. She paused at one junction longer than usual, studying the map, then the land around her. Everything looked the same. Trees rose endlessly, trunks blurring together. She chose a direction with confidence she didn't entirely feel, telling herself doubt was just fatigue. Hours passed. The rain stopped, leaving behind a heavy silence. No birds, no wind, only the sound of her own steps and breathing. She noticed then how alone she truly was. No distant voices, no movement beyond her narrow line of sight. The trail dipped downward, then leveled out into an area where the ground felt softer, unstable. She felt an unfamiliar tension settle in her chest, a quiet warning she tried to ignore. She checked her phone. No signal, battery low. She frowned, tucking it away, telling herself it didn't matter. She had handled worse situations before. Still, she marked a tree with a strip of bright tape from her pack, a habit she'd picked up over the years, just in case. As daylight began to fade, she realized she hadn't seen a trail marker in a long time. Panic crept in slowly, like cold seeping through wet fabric. She stopped walking, forcing herself to breathe. Rule number 1: don't wander blindly. She turned in a slow circle, studying the forest. Every direction looked identical. The trees stood tall and indifferent, their branches tangled high above, blocking what little light remained. She called out once, her voice sounding too loud, too fragile. No answer came back. The forest absorbed the sound completely. She swallowed, heart beating faster now. She decided to set up camp where she was, wait for morning. Darkness on the move was never a good idea. As she worked, her hands shook despite her efforts to stay calm. The forest felt closer than before, pressing in from all sides. When the last of the light disappeared, the darkness was complete, thick as fabric. She zipped herself into the tent, lying still, listening. Somewhere in the distance, something moved. Slow, deliberate. She held her breath, straining to identify the sound, but it never came close enough to name. Sleep did not come easily that night. Her thoughts spiraled, jumping between confidence and fear. She told herself she would retrace her steps at first light. She would find the trail. She always did. Morning arrived quietly, gray and damp. She packed quickly, eager to move. The forest looked different in daylight, less threatening but more confusing. The tape she had tied to the tree was gone. She stared at the bare trunk, disbelief tightening her chest. She checked nearby trees, scanning the ground. Nothing. The forest stood unchanged, as if she had never been there at all. For the first time since stepping onto the Appalachian Trail, she felt truly lost. She tried to stay calm, repeating it like a quiet chant in her head. Panic wastes energy. Panic makes mistakes. She took a deep breath and forced her thoughts into order. The missing tape unsettled her, but she told herself there had to be a simple explanation. Wind. Rain. Maybe she tied it to the wrong tree in the fading light. Forests played tricks on the mind, especially when fear was looking for a way in. She chose a direction based on instinct, following what looked like a faint depression in the ground. Each step felt heavier than the last. The deeper she went, the thicker the undergrowth became. Branches clawed at her sleeves. Roots twisted underfoot. Time stretched strangely, minutes slipping by unnoticed until hours had passed and the sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent. She stopped to drink water and realized how quiet it was again. Too quiet. No insects, no birds. The absence felt intentional, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. She checked her supplies. Food was still enough for a few days, water less so. She knew streams ran through this region, but she hadn't seen one in hours. She called out again, louder this time. Her voice cracked as it echoed briefly, then vanished. No response. Not even her own echo returned. The silence afterward felt heavier than before. As the day wore on, the land subtly changed. The ground sloped downward, becoming uneven and slick. Moss-coated rocks in thick layers hiding their edges. She slipped once, catching herself on a tree, heart racing. Adrenaline surged, sharpening her senses. She noticed then a strange smell in the air, faint but unmistakable. Rotting wood mixed with something metallic. She wrinkled her nose, unsettled, but kept moving. Late in the afternoon, she stumbled upon something that didn't belong. A piece of fabric hung from a low branch, faded and torn. She froze, staring at it. It looked old, weathered by time. Not hers. She reached out hesitantly, touching it with 2 fingers. The fabric crumbled slightly under her touch. Her mind raced. Someone else had been here. Recently or long ago? The thought brought no comfort, only questions. She marked the spot with another strip of tape, tying it tight this time, double-knotted. She forced herself to keep moving, following what she hoped was a natural path downhill, trusting gravity to lead her toward water or a trail. The light began to dim again, the forest shifting into evening shadows. When she realized she was walking in circles, frustration boiled over into fear. Familiar trees reappeared, the same crooked trunk, the same fallen log. Her breath grew shallow. She pressed her palms into her eyes, fighting the urge to scream. She couldn't afford to lose control. As night fell, the forest came alive in unsettling ways. Sounds surrounded her, closer now. Footsteps that stopped when she stopped. Branches snapping not from wind, but from weight. She spun around more than once, heart pounding, flashlight sweeping across empty space. She decided to climb, scrambling up a rocky incline until her legs burned. At the top, she hoped for a view, a break in the trees. Instead, she found herself in a small clearing choked with dead trees, their branches reaching upward like frozen hands. In the center stood a massive ancient tree, its bark dark and scarred. She didn't like the way the air felt there. Heavy, pressurized. She turned to leave, but something caught her eye. Carved into the trunk were markings, not words, symbols, deep grooves cut with deliberate force. They were weathered, old, but unmistakably intentional. Her skin prickled. She backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at her to leave. That was when she heard it clearly for the first time, a sound behind her. Breathing. She spun around, flashlight shaking in her grip, beam slicing through the darkness. Nothing stood there, just trees, shadows. But the feeling didn't fade. She was no longer alone. She could feel it as surely as she felt the ground beneath her feet. She ran. Branches tore at her hair and clothes as she fled blindly through the forest. She tripped, fell hard, pain flaring in her ankle. She cried out despite herself, then clamped a hand over her mouth. Tears blurred her vision as she struggled back to her feet, limping now, each step agony. Eventually, exhaustion forced her to stop. She collapsed against a tree, chest heaving, ears ringing with her own heartbeat. The forest seemed to close in, watching, waiting. Somewhere nearby, something moved slowly, deliberately, no longer hiding its presence. She realized then that getting lost hadn't been the worst thing that happened to her. It was being found. She pressed herself against the tree, forcing her breathing to slow. Every instinct told her to run again, but her body refused. Pain throbbed through her ankle, sharp and unforgiving. She listened instead, straining to separate real sounds from the ones fear invented. The forest breathed around her, leaves rustling softly, branches creaking under unseen weight. Whatever had been following her no longer rushed. It had patience. She waited until the sounds faded, then pushed herself forward, limping through the darkness. Her flashlight flickered, dimming with each step. She turned it off to save power, trusting the faint glow of the moon filtering through the canopy. Shadows stretched unnaturally, shapes twisting into things they weren't. She focused on the ground ahead, counting steps, anything to keep her mind from unraveling. Hours passed in fragments. She didn't remember when she fell asleep, only that she woke suddenly, heart racing, convinced someone had been standing over her. Dawn crept in slowly, revealing a forest that looked deceptively peaceful. Morning light softened the horrors of the night, but it couldn't erase the dread that clung to her. She tried to stand and nearly screamed. Her ankle had swollen overnight, stiff and bruised. Walking would be slow now, dangerous. Still, staying was worse. She tore strips from her shirt, binding her ankle as tightly as she could, jaw clenched against the pain. As she moved deeper into the woods, the forest began to change again. Trees grew farther apart, trunks taller and older. The ground sloped downward into a shallow ravine, where fog pooled thickly, refusing to lift even as the sun rose. The air there was cold, damp, carrying that same metallic scent she had noticed before. She followed the ravine, hope flickering weakly. Water meant life. Water meant a way out. Her throat burned with thirst, lips cracked and dry. When she finally heard the trickle of a stream, relief washed over her so intensely her knees buckled. She knelt at the water's edge, hands trembling as she drank. The water was icy, shocking her system, but she didn't care. She drank until her stomach cramped, then splashed her face, grounding herself in the sensation. For a brief moment, she felt human again. That moment ended when she noticed the footprints. They lined the muddy bank on the opposite side of the stream. Bare feet, too large to belong to a child, too misshapen to be animal. Toes dug deep into the earth, heels heavy, deliberate. They faced the water, faced her. She backed away slowly, pulse roaring in her ears. The forest was silent again, as if listening. She turned and ran as best she could, ignoring the pain, ignoring the tearing sensation in her ankle. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. By afternoon, her strength was gone. Hunger gnawed at her, dizziness clouding her vision. She stumbled into another clearing, smaller than the last, hidden deep among towering trees. At its center stood a wooden structure, old, crude, a shack, barely standing, half swallowed by vines and moss. She froze. Every rational thought screamed at her to stay away. But desperation overpowered fear. Shelter meant safety. Shelter meant rest. She approached cautiously, heart pounding. Inside, the air was stale and suffocating. Light filtered through gaps in the warped boards, illuminating the interior just enough to see what lay within. Scratches lined the walls. Deep grooves carved at shoulder height, chaotic and violent. In one corner lay a pile of bones. Animal, she told herself at first. She had to believe that. Then she saw the backpack. It was old, sun-faded, but unmistakably human. Torn straps, a broken zipper. Nearby lay scraps of clothing, brittle with age. She felt bile rise in her throat as realization crashed over her. Others had been here. Others had gotten lost. Others had not made it out. A sound outside snapped her attention back to the present. Slow footsteps circled the shack, deliberate and unhurried. The floorboards creaked beneath her as she backed away, pressing herself against the far wall, breath shallow and silent. A shadow passed across the doorway, blocking the light. She saw only its outline at first, tall, unnaturally thin. It lingered there, unmoving, as if savoring the moment. The door groaned open. She screamed. What followed was chaos. She bolted past the figure as it reached for her, its grip brushing her sleeve. She didn't stop running. Branches lashed her face, blood warm against her skin. Her lungs burned, legs shaking, but terror carried her forward. Somehow, impossibly, she burst through the trees and onto a familiar path. The trail. Real, marked, solid beneath her feet. She collapsed there, sobbing, clutching the dirt as if it might disappear. When search teams found her 2 days later, dehydrated and barely conscious, she couldn't speak at first. Her eyes tracked every movement, every shadow. When she finally told her story, her voice was flat, distant, as if the words belonged to someone else. Authorities searched the area she described. They found the ravine, the stream, the clearing. But the shack was gone. No bones, no backpack, no markings. Only an ancient tree at the center of the forest, its bark scarred with deep weathered grooves, standing silently among the others, as if it had always been there. And as she was taken away on a stretcher, she swore she felt the forest watching her leave, patient and waiting, certain that not everyone who walked its trails was ever meant to truly escape.